You those who are in prison, tears are a part of everyday experience. You know that haunting quote from Oscar Wilde? It instantly throws us right into the echoing, terrifying halls of a first-time offender's very first night behind bars.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the visceral, harrowing survival story of a woman named Miriam. We're going to simply show you her time in that prison, the sights, the sounds, and the absolute relentless psychological pressure she faced back in 1939 inside Her Majesty's Prison Holloway. But before we actually pass through those prison gates, we really have to look at what brought a 32-year-old mother of two to this terrifying place to begin with. 7 shillings. That's it. That is the devastatingly low value of the bakery goods Miriam stole from her employer. And get this, she only committed the crime to feed her terribly sick 2-year-old daughter who was suffering from pleurisy. When you contrast that minor, desperate theft with the terrifying 1-year sentence she received, well, it gives you a pretty clear sense of just how unforgiving the justice system was in that era.
Okay, let's dive into this. Part 1. Welcome to Holloway Prison, entering the house of detention. So, picture the scene. Miriam is brought in late at night. She's exhausted, she's still wearing the exact same scuffed Woolworth shoes she was arrested in, and then, boom! The massive iron doors of Holloway, which is basically this looming, white, fortified castle of a building, slam shut behind her. She's completely stripped of her belongings, her identity is literally replaced by a card and a number, and her initial descent leaves her standing under the blinding, glaring lights of an area known as the Center. This is the vast, echoing heart of the prison where the 4 great wings converge. Looking up, she sees 4 whole tiers of landings separated by tight wire netting. And the noise. It's absolutely deafening. It's just a constant cacophonous clatter of hard shoes on asphalt floors and the relentless jangling of massive keys hanging from the wardress's belts. In an instant, her old identity is entirely gone.
But you know, it wasn't just the sights and sounds that got to you. It was the visceral sensory deprivation. As Miriam stands there, her nostrils are just assaulted by this unforgettable, foul smell that permeated literally every inch of the wings. It was a suffocating mix of strong vinegar disinfectant and stale foot odor. Just imagine the intense claustrophobia of breathing that in day after day. You're not just locked in a cell, you're steeped in an atmosphere that is purposefully designed to make you feel tiny.
Part 2. The unforgiving daily routine. The mechanics of control.
Holloway was basically a machine, and the inmates, they were just cogs forced to turn at the exact same pace. Let's walk through this grueling 1939 prison schedule. The entire day was rigidly controlled by the ringing of a massive bell. At 6 a.m. sharp, the warning bell sounds, waking you from your freezing bed. By 1:30 p.m., you have the afternoon unlock to return to labor. At 5 p.m., a meager tea is served, and then, at exactly 5:30 p.m., comes the final lockup.
And honestly, nothing really illustrates the complete lack of dignity in this routine quite like the daily slop out. Every single morning, the women had to endure this tense, highly regulated procedure. Step 1, you empty your foul-smelling night pail into a shared lavatory. Step 2, quickly fill the pail with boiling water to clean it out. And Step 3, return immediately to your cell. It was one of the very few times the women briefly interacted, exchanging hushed whispers before being locked away all over again.
But here is the truly crucial point. What happens after that final 5:30 p.m. lockup? For 14 straight hours, Miriam was locked in a tiny, pitch-dark cell measuring just a few feet across. She had absolutely nothing but a cup of lukewarm cocoa, a few heavily censored library books, and her own despair. No family, no comfort. Just 14 hours of solitary brooding every single night, testing the absolute limits of her sanity.
Part 3. Faces behind the bars. The Holloway ecosystem.
So this prison was a complex ecosystem with a really strict hierarchy, and they differentiated it right there on the women's uniforms. Miriam wore a red tie. This signified she was a first-time offender, which kept her somewhat separated from the most dangerous elements. But on the totally opposite end of the spectrum were the gray ties. These were your hardened, long-term lifers who knew every unwritten rule, every smuggling route, and who held immense power within the institutionalized inmate population.
Now, the wildly diverse ways Holloway actually affected these women can really be seen in these heartbreaking micro-narratives. Take a look at Tracy, for instance. She escaped a violent pimp and actually embraced the prison as a safe haven. Hey, it had a roof and food. Then there's Akina, a terrified Japanese immigrant who spoke no English at all, but managed to survive through her exquisite needlework. And Eva, a young East End girl who was tragically pregnant and who was ultimately completely broken by the system.
Later on in her sentence, Miriam actually earned a privileged job delivering library books. But I want to add a pretty chilling, surprising fact about this job. Her route often forced her to walk right near the execution shed. It was the seemingly abandoned, anonymous brick building tacked onto the end of B Wing, where hangings actually occurred. It was a place so grim and so heavy with history that the inmates noted even the birds refused to sing in the trees around it. Seriously, how eerie is that?
Part 4. The Punishment Cell. The climax in the strips. All right, now we reach the true narrative climax of Miriam's year. Even with her privileged job and basically just trying to keep her head down, her careful survival strategy completely falls apart. Here is the crucial turning point. Miriam is falsely accused of a horrific assault against another inmate in a cell. She gets dragged before the governor. Now, she knows she's innocent, but to prove it, she's forced to choose between telling the truth to the authorities or upholding the inmate's unwritten code of silence. And let me tell you, to break that code meant becoming a massive target for violent retaliation.
Choosing to remain silent, Miriam faces her terrifying punishment. Step 1, she's escorted down to the basement punishment blocks, known ominously as the strips, with absolutely no warning. Step 2, she's thrown into a freezing, windowless cell with nothing but filthy bedding on a stone floor. And Step 3, she's kept under a blinding electric light all night long. It is a brutal, calculated demonstration of how the system physically and psychologically disciplines anyone caught in its administrative crosshairs.
So I want to pose this question to you. What actually happens when you're forced to choose between the wrath of the wardens and the violent retaliation of your fellow inmates? It's literally an impossible psychological dilemma. And while the prison governor did eventually realize she was innocent and completely cleared her of the charges, the psychological scar of that night in the blinding light of the strips, that remained with Miriam forever.
Part 5. Freedom and its Aftermath. Emerging from the Shadow. After nearly a full year of navigating the sensory deprivation, the incredibly strict hierarchy, and the sheer terror of the punishment blocks, the completely disorienting day of her release finally arrives. But she isn't exactly stepping into a fairy tale ending here. The system releases her back into the world with her scuffed Woolworth shoes, a train ticket, and a mere 10-shilling note. That's it. That is absolutely all she has to show for the devastating disruption of her life. And the sobering, tragic post-prison fates of Miriam's friends really reveal the true toll of this place. Miriam survived, sure, but was permanently scarred. Joyce died in a hospital from syphilis. Rafa was released early, only to end up sent to an asylum. Akina was interned during World War II before later joining the WAF. And Peggy, the elderly lifer, she suffered a heart attack and was actually buried within the very walls of the prison. The shadow of Holloway followed these women forever.
The source text we're looking at sums it up perfectly. Holloway was indeed a magnet for misery. The main takeaway from Miriam's harrowing journey is that this prison was an institution that systematically stripped away human dignity, all under the guise of punishment. It wasn't just a building, it was a machine explicitly designed to break the spirit.
Which brings us to our final, really provocative thought. Looking at the grueling routines, the deep isolation, and the brutal punishment of the strips, does an environment like 1939 Holloway truly rehabilitate anyone? Or does it simply create better, more hardened criminals who have just figured out how to survive the most inhumane conditions imaginable? Keep thinking about that question. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.